Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf tzadi of Nedarim 90. We are going to begin on the bottom of Peitet Amabet. And hold on for a second as I share my screen. And we're going to just review something that we looked at the end of the day yesterday with Ellie, just because we're going to offer another version of another understanding of the story. And so as a result, it makes sense to sort of go over the story again. But let's back up and remind ourselves what our framework is that we're talking about. So yesterday, and I think maybe even the day before, we learned about a woman making a neder. And the question is what time do we need to focus on if there is a time set in the neder? So if the woman says that I am making a neder that should take effect 30 days from now, do we focus on the moment that she said that neder to determine who and under what conditions the neder can be revoked by either the father or the husband? Or she said that the neder would take effect 30 days from now. Do we focus on when that moment occurs and the moment that it takes effect? And what we saw in the Mishnayos in Nedarim is that we just focus on the timing of her words. And then we saw that, in fact, this is a machlokas between Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim. The Rabbi Natan says, so that was if you just say the timeline. If I say the neder should take effect in 30 days. What about if instead of focusing on an explicit timeline, I make a conditional vow? So my vow will only occur if it rains tomorrow, if it doesn't rain tomorrow, if it rains in 3 weeks, if it doesn't rain in 3 weeks, whatever it is, whatever condition that I may make on it. Do we say that the husband / father is able to revoke the vow immediately upon it leaving the mouth of the wife or daughter? Or do we say that no, we look at when it takes effect? And again, the Mishnah seems to indicate that we focus only on the speaking, that the moment of speech is the one that we care about for analysis. And then we had in our Gemara at the bottom of Peitet Amabet after the Mishnah, it noted that actually there's a machlokas, that in fact the position that was outlined in our Mishnah is that of the Chachamim. But Rabbi Natan says, no, if there's a precondition that's included in the neder, the vow must take effect for the husband to revoke the neder. The vow must take effect for the husband to revoke the neder. And so as a result, if she says that the neder is based on X, Y, and Z, it is not until the moment of X, Y, and Z that we then ask the question, okay, now you can hear it, husband or father, and now we can evaluate, are you able to revoke the vow? Are you in fact married? Are you in fact the father of a girl who was under the age of Bogeret, under the age of 12 and a half? That was the question. And then we had a story, and so we're going to pick up again with this story about a situation, and we're going to apply this rule, apply this question of, does a vow need to take effect, not with respect to revocation, but with respect to annulment? So again, revocation, that's what's done by the father or the husband, whereas annulment, that's what happens if you ask either a Beit Din or a Chacham to annul the vow. And so now we're going to, again, and the question is when it comes to asking for annulment of the vow, does the vow have to have taken effect, or can you do the annulment once it's left your mouth? And we're going to try to make various proofs in that regard. So let's take a look. We're at the fifth to last line on Peitet Amabet, on 89b, and the word is hahu gabra, as we pick up now on the fourth to last line. There was a certain guy, the Itzer Hanayasa de Alma alay. He caused a prohibition of all benefit from the world on himself but he only did it so if he would get married before he learned the halacha. He learned halacha. Now, what does it mean to learn halacha? So there are a couple of different options. So let's just run through them. I don't know whether they were covered yesterday, but just in case they weren't, or even if they were, always good to review them. So let's start with the Ran, third line up in the from the very bottom of the Ran. In nisiva itza kilotanina, that he said, if I get married without having learned halacha, shahaya rotza lilmod Torah kodem sheyisa isha. He wanted to learn Torah before he got married. Kadesh lo yispata machmata, because he was worried that he was going to not be able to spend time learning Torah as a result of getting married. Listen, the person has an obligation to do various work. He's got a millstone on his, I think that's the right word, millstone on his shoulder, and he's going to learn Torah. No, it's very difficult to make a living and to learn Torah at the same time. And indeed, I think that this is, of course, when we say at a Brit that we wish that the child should grow up look Torah, l'chuppah, u'masim tovim, right? That what we're really saying is look, we recognize that Torah needs to come before chuppah. That once you get married, there are other obligations to your wife, obligations to make a livelihood, to support your wife, obligations to children, God willing, when they have children, if God blesses them in that way, and so on. So as a result, Torah, chuppah, masim tovim. It's an appropriate order. That's the order that we live our lives. So that's the Ran. Let's take a quick look in Tosos here, and Tosos says ad nesivna, again, also 3 lines up from the very bottom of the Tosos. Tosos in the bottom right-hand corner of the page. I nesivna itza b'delotanina ad she'almod kol hashas. That what the person is saying when we say hilchasa in the Gemara, what we're really saying is learning Talmud, learning all of, or in this case, Shisha Sidrei, right? The Shin and the Samach stand for Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, that they should learn all of the Mishnah. Of course, because on some level, the conversations that are had in our Talmud were not the written conversations; they were had in the Beit Midrash, and so the person was the indication was that the person wasn't referring to the Gemara, which didn't exist at the time, but rather to the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. So. All right. So now below chal ha'isr, and now and of course again to clarify, the Tosos adds that the prohibition did not take effect ad shenasei ha'isha. So until he actually got married, right? Because his condition was, I will not benefit from the world if I marry a woman before learning all of Gemara, all of Shas. So the point is that what he's really saying. So is I'm going to learn Shas. If I learn Shas, then there's no neder whatsoever. If I don't learn Shas, then there's no neder until I get married. So that's the situation. Now, the Rush asks a very good question here. I don't understand. We've always said, or we've said before during our learning together, that you cannot, that if you make a neder that is not capable of being fulfilled, well, then that is considered a shvuas shav, essentially a false oath, and you're actually obligated lashes associated with that. So let's take a look again. Actually, in this case, it's the 3rd line up, excluding the 3 words on the bottom line. So if we go, and actually begins 4 lines up on the left-hand edge, and then the bottom left-hand corner of the page. So Titzar Hanad Alma Alai, right? He's going to prohibit all benefit from the world to himself. So Asar Atzmo B'Kol Hanot Sheba'olam. He's prohibiting any kind of benefit from the world. Im Yisa Isha Kodem Shel Yilmod Halachot. That if he were to get married before he were to marry, before he were to learn the halacha. Even though it's impossible to live in this world without getting hana. Lo havi neder shav. This kind of conditional neder is not considered a false neder. It's not considered automatically false that that he should be punished immediately. Because it had a condition associated with it. And so even when the underlying neder might be one that cannot be fulfilled, if in fact there's a precondition to the neder, and the precondition could be fulfilled, well, then that is not considered a shvuas shav or a neder shav, as we in this particular context. So that was a couple of interesting issues again. But again, what did he do? He said, I need to learn Torah. But unfortunately, it didn't go so well for him. So let's take a look. So we pick up second to last line on Pei Tedamabet, second word on the line, right? I'm sorry, third to last line, second to last word on the line. Rahib begapev tuvlaya. So he, literally this means that he ran with his walking stick and his purse, which means, he tried his best. He did every kind of effort. It wasn't a lack of effort on his part. But below MC Lemisna, he just couldn't hack it. It wasn't for him. Not everybody has the ability to learn Torah and to study Gemara. You need the right head for it. And even if you have the right head for it, to be able to memorize and remember what you learn is in and of itself a challenge. So the bottom line is he was stuck, because now he has this neder that he made. He may have not have been a good idea to make the neder. As we say, if you make a neder, it's like building a bama, as well, building an altar outside the Beit HaMikdash, and we'll see that reference actually later today. But anyway, the point is where looks like he's in trouble. Well, Asa Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. So Rav Acha bar Rav Huna comes to the rescue. B'shibshei. And he tricked him. He made him. He caused him to make a mistake. And he was able to get him to marry somebody. So of course now that he married somebody, the neder kicks in as we turn to Tzaddik Amud Aleph. The sharkei tina. So what did Rav Acha bar Rav Huna do? He sharkei tina. He took some dirt, he took some mud, and he wiped it on him. Now, what in the world is that all about? Well, there are 5 different explanations for what this is about. The Ran, the Mefarish, Tosfos offers 2, and the Rush. So let's go through them, and we'll take a look at them one by one. So the first line of the Ran gives us the first answer. That the point is that by getting him all dirty and muddy, it was very quick that he would need help from others, la'alter, from lichbos begadav, in order to wash his clothes, because as is often the case, people go to the cleaners to wash their clothes, and so too here, if he got mud on it, it wouldn't be something that he might be able to clean on his own. He would need some assistance, and so that was why, according to the Ran, the mud was put on him. The Mefarish in the top right-hand side of the page says something alternative. Gives an alternative. B'shar ketina, tach panav betit. It wasn't on his clothing, it was his face. And why? Kadesha lo yakirehu Rav Chisda. Because, I should read the next line. And then they brought him to Rav Chisda. And the reason that they brought him to Rav Chisda was a chacham that was going to annul the vow that he made. So the point is that that we didn't want the person to be recognized by Rav Chisda. Why didn't they? Ki'ilu haya Adam echad mehem shenadar shelo yusa isha kadeshi yatir lo, because we wanted he just wanted to be somebody who swore not to marry a woman, and so as a result, we wanted to annul that vow. The efshar ilu hayamakiro lo hayamatir lo, that if in fact he recognized that this was the guy who's committed to learn halacha and wasn't successful, that in and of itself might disqualify him, and either Rav Chisda would think that the person needed to do more effort, or that he was so far off the right path in terms of how one goes about committing oneself to learn Torah, that in fact he wouldn't annul the vow. So the point is according to the Ran, it was about creating need for somebody else to help him clean his clothing. According to the Mefarish, it was about avoiding a knowledge of Rav Chisda, because we didn't want Rav Chisda to say no to annulling the vow. Let's take a look at Tosos. Tosos offers two more explanations. Top of the Tosos, and again, left-hand column of the page. V'shar Geptina, Perish Tachu Betit Shelo Ye'ena Mina Olam. That the point of putting him in mud is so that effectively he can't see or benefit from the world around him. That if he's covered in mud, then there's no way that he can benefit from the world, because anything he touches will get muddy and disgusting. So as a result, he won't actually benefit from it. Inami yesh lefarish sharko shahaya sharko kadesha lo yakirehu Rav Chisda shahaya mitbayesh alma shalo kiem nidro. So the alternative is of the opposite side of what the Mefarish said, and that we didn't want the guy to be recognized by Rav Chisda because he didn't want to be embarrassed. That the point of the mud was not having anything to do with the neder, but rather it was so that the guy wouldn't be recognized, and then he would be able to appear in front of Rav Chisda in the future because he wouldn't be recognized. He wouldn't be so embarrassed. So that's answer number 4, explanation number 4. And finally, we have the rush in the inner column on the right-hand side of the page, Vashar Kitina, again, on top of the rush. Ki hivshit lebagadav. No, the point is that the guy needed to get off all his clothing because any clothing that he had was benefit from the world. And so as a result, he was naked, and therefore, and they covered him in mud, and then they brought him in front of Rav Chisda, because they're not going to bring him in front of Rav Chisda naked. So the point is that they covered him in mud, so that way it wouldn't really be benefiting from the world. It would just be covering him so that he would have the opportunity to appear in front of others. So we've got 5 different answers, again, either in order to create need or to avoid recognition, either because of embarrassment or so that Rav Chisda wouldn't refuse to annul the vow, or it was because that the person shouldn't benefit from the world, possibly from a visual perspective or other perspective, or being so muddy that they can't touch anything in the world, or the guy just needed to get undressed. And so that could be the 5th reason. So 5 different explanations, just interesting understanding. And so now Amar Rava. Rava tells us, why did we tell us this whole story? Because man chakim l'miyavid kiha milsa. How smart it was that what Rav Acha bar Rav Huna did. Ilav to Rav Acha bar Rav Huna to Gaber Ramahu. Thank God that we've got great people like Rav Acha bar Rav Huna to Kasavar. And what was his thinking? To Kasavar to Kihechi to Pligi Rabbanav Rabbi Nasan Bahafara. That just as the Chachamim and Rav Nasan disagree with respect to a husband or father revoking a vow, so too they disagree with respect to asking a Chacham to annul the vow. That in both cases you need the neder. The Rabbi Natan would say that you need the neder to take effect, and so as a result, that's why he needed to have the individual get married, because before the marriage, he couldn't annul the vow because the vow did not yet take effect. However, that's not the only view, because Rav Papi says, no, machlokas bahafara. Yes, we had in our Gemara at the end of the day yesterday that Rabbi Natan and Chachamim argue about hafara, with Rabbi Natan saying no, that you can only do hafara once the neder takes effect, whereas the Chachamim say no, as soon as it leaves the person's mouth, the neder can be revoked. But the Rabbi Natan Savar Eina Baal Mefer Ella Im Kain Chal Neder, right? Again, as we said yesterday, that the Rabbi Natan says that a husband can only revoke a neder once it's taken effect. Diksiv v'chafra halivana. And this is not actually a true source. This is a pasuk from Yeshaya, but we're going to use this as either a memory mnemonic or a hint to the fact, because v'chafra, which means ashamed, that the halavana, that the moon is going to be ashamed. V'chafra sounds like hafara. So we're going to say hafara, and halavana sounds like le binyan, so for the building. And what building are we talking about? We're talking about how a neder, if you make a neder, it's like building a bama. It's like building an altar outside the Beit HaMikdash, which is prohibited. So hafara halavana, meaning halabin, habinyan, that until you actually have a true neder, a neder that's taken effect, that's when you can do hafara. That's the hint. It's just like I said, a more of a memory mnemonic. This is not a proof. The Rabbanan sabrate, no. Rabbanan say no. Baal mefer afal pisha lo chal neder. The Chachamim say you can, that the husband or father has the right to revoke the neder as soon as it goes out of the woman's mouth. He does not have to wait for the neder to take effect. How do I know that? Because we have a pasuk. This is from Eov, and again, more highlighting of the idea. Diksiv mefer machshavot arumim, that God revokes the thoughts of the crafty. But if again, we have here the concepts of revocation, of revoking, hafara, and machshavos, that even before it becomes an actual neder, when it is just the words that have left the mouth, then it can be annulled. So although Rav Papi and everybody agrees that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim with respect to revocation of a vow by a father or a husband, with Rabbi Natan saying it's got to take effect, and the Chachamim saying it does not. Everybody, Divrei Hakol, Ein Chacham Matir Klum, Ella Im Kain Chal Neder. That the reason that Rav Acha bar Rav Huna needed to have the guy get married so that the vow could take effect is because everybody, both Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim, everybody agrees that you, in order to annul a vow, you need it to have taken effect. The wording is you cannot profane your word, meaning, and even chel has a play on chal, that it takes effect. That the issue is that you have to, that when we're talking about is a word, a vow that has taken effect. And so as a result, in order to annul the vow, you need, in order for Rav Acha bar Rav Huna to bring this individual to Rav Chisda, the vow needed to have taken effect, even according to the Chachamim. So we're going to give two efforts to try and support Rav Papi's view. Neither of them are going to be successful, even though in the end, I believe that Rav Papi's view is the viewpoint that we're going to take. So let's take a look. So Lema Messiah, like maybe we can bring a proof to Rav Papi's view, namely that the machlokas, that although they argue about hafara, everybody agrees that when it comes time to annul a vow, the vow must have taken effect. That if you have a conditional vow, that until the condition occurs, you cannot annul the vow. So how do I know that? Because look at this brisa. Konam she'eni nen leploni. If I say that I'm not going to benefit from this person, ulamisha ashel alav, and I'm not going to benefit from the person that I asked for the vow to be annulled. Well, then what do you say? What does the brisa continue? Nishal al harishon, ba'achar kak nishal al sheni. That he first needs to annul the first part of the vow, and then he needs to annul the second part of the vow. So what's the implication, right? The only time that the second part of the vow even takes effect is when the first part of the vow gets asked. So it totally makes sense that you need to wait, because you need to wait until the second part of the vow takes effect. And isn't that a proof that even the Chachamim would say that you need to wait until the second part, until a vow takes effect before you ask for annulment? And if you say that in fact you can ask for annulment even when the neder has not yet taken effect, Ibai al high nitshel beresha, Ibai al high nitshel beresha. He could choose either half of the neder to ask about first, and he could prevent the second half of his neder from ever being chal. He can say, listen, I want to annul the part of my neder that says that if I ask about the first part of the neder, that the person that I ask is also prohibited. So why, so doesn't that show that Rav Papi is correct? That in fact, everybody agrees that in fact, we need to have the vow take effect before it can be annulled? No, it does not prove it, because umiyada ihai kama, ihai basra, because when we say the first and we say the second, are we referring to the parts of the neder, or are we referring to the timing of the request? That we had understood this brisa as talking about the parts of the neder. The person first said that the neder was on, that he's not going to benefit from person A, and then he said, I'm not going to benefit from the person that I ask to revoke, to annul the neder about person A. And so when we said that he first needs to ask about the first part, and then he asks about the second part, that wasn't the right interpretation. Rather, whatever he asked about first, he asks about first. And whatever he asks about second, he asks about second. He just needs to ask about them on an individual level. That's all we're saying. We're not giving a specific order to the way it's supposed to be done. So as the Ran says, 3, 6, 7 lines down in the medium wide lines of the Ran on the left-hand side of the page on Tzadik Amud Aleph, umiyada hai kama v'hai basra. Do we know which one is first and which one is last? Hashas hu deka dachi, that this is the Gemara coming back to the answer, to push off the proof. Leman demaisi hachsiyasa, to the based on the point of view of the one who brought this as a proof. Demi yada leman kari tana rishon o achron. How do I know which one the Tana in this brisa was referring to as first or last? Dilma kikatani ki katani rishon usheni l'she'ela kamar. That when he referenced the first and the second, it wasn't the first and the second that he mentioned when he made the neder. It's the first and the second to be asked about. Shenishal al eza mehen sheyirsa, because in fact the person can ask about whichever one he wants to. For tchila, he can ask about either one first. Vahu kari le rishon, and then that one will be called first. Va'oto achar shenishal alav achar kari le achron, and the second one that he asks about second would be called the last one. So it doesn't necessarily prove it. So so that was effort number one. Well, elalema misayele. Let's make another proof, because this one is going to be even clearer that it's going to be a proof to Rav Papi. Konam she'eni nan elaponi. I say that I'm not going to benefit from person A. Hareini and nazir l'kashesh alav. And if in fact I do try to annul that vow, then I will become a nazir. So what does the brisa tell us? Nishal al nidro va'achar kach nishal al nizro. Now it's completely clear which one we're talking about. The first one that you have to ask about is the neder, that he's not going to derive benefit from person A. And only after that, he's not going to, I'm sorry for not scrolling my screen. And only after that is he not going to benefit. So we're in Q2 on the screen. And only after that is he not going to benefit from only after that can he ask about the Nazirut. So clearly in this case, the reason that he's not asking about the Nazirut first is because the Nazirut has to take effect before he can petition that and have it be canceled by a chacham. And if you say that he can revoke a neder even though it hasn't taken effect, well then well then he should be able to ask about either one. So the Gemara answers that again, it does not have to be a proof to Rav Papi, because maybe Rabbi Nassan, maybe this is Rabbi Nassan, that even Rava agrees that there is somebody who says this position in this brisa because it's Rabbi Natan. Rava says that Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim agree about both, and maybe this brisa follows Rabbi Natan, which says that you need to have the neder bichal in order to ask for its annulment. Now we're going to offer Ravina's view. So we offered view number one, which was Rava's view, and we tried to contradict it, or at least support Rav Papi's view, but we were unsuccessful. Rava's view is that Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim argue about both the ability to do hafara on a neder, to revoke a neder, and the ability to be matir neder, and the ability to annul a neder. So they argue about both, according to Rava. According to Rav Papi, view number one, they argue about hafara, but everybody agrees that the neder needs to be chal in order to annul it. Now we're going to have the other version of Rav Papi. Amar Ravina, Amar Li Maramar. Maramar said to me, Hachi Amar Avuch Mishmei de Rav Papi. This is what your father said in the name of Rav Papi. Machlokas bahafara aval b'she'ela divrei hakol mefer va'afal pisha lo chal neder. That it was the exact opposite. That in fact, and I have it here on the screen in a square, in a matrix, to make it a little easier, right? So everybody agrees that when it comes to hafara, Rabbi Natan and the Chachamim argue, and Rabbi Natan says the neder must take effect, and the Chachamim say it doesn't have to take effect in order to do the hafara. However, now the view of Ravina and the view of Rav Papi is that everyone agrees that it doesn't, that when it comes to being matir a neder, everyone agrees that it does not need to take effect, meaning that as soon as it comes out of a person's mouth, the person has the ability to do hataris nedarim. But now we're going to use, all right, and why? Meaning that it does not have to take effect. Essentially, it's rereading lo yachel dvaro as saying not taking effect. So the point is that this is the third view. But now we're going to use the two cases that we attempted to bring as a support for Rav Papi. Now that we've changed Rav Papi to say the exact opposite, we're going to bring them as an effort to contradict Rav Papi. So let's take a look. Lamemra de lo hava be maisa. The point is that you don't have, even if there's no, a neder does not have to have a practical ramification in order for it to be annulled, as we turn to the top of Tzadik Amud Bet. So, Meisvei, we're going to again ask from the same two brises that we cited before, so we can go through it relatively quickly because the questions are pretty clear. Meisvei, konam she'eni nene leploni, ulamisha nishal alav. Again, I'm not going to benefit from person A or the person that I asked to revoke, to annul my vow about person A. Nishal ala rishon, va'akar kak nishal al sheni. You ask about the first, and then you ask about the second. Amai, ibai al hai nichal, beresha, ibai al hai nichal, beresha. If everybody agrees that you can ask about either one, well, then why do we need to say that you ask about the first one first and the second one second? Again, miyodea hai rishon hai sheni. How do we know which one is first and which one is second? Maybe the reference to first and second is not about the reference to when they were said, but rather when which one is asked about. So, all right, so that, okay, fine, you've successfully avoided that challenge, but what about the following? Meisvei, konam she'eni nana, v'hareini nazar l'kashal. What about the situation if I'm not going to benefit person A, and if I do annul that vow, well, then I'm going to become a nazir. So, nishal al nidro v'akar kak nishal al nidro. We say specifically that you got to ask about the neder, and then ask about the nezer. If everybody agrees that you can annul in any order, that you can annul a vow even before it takes an effect, then of course you should be able to annul the nezirut even before you annul the other neder, even before it takes effect. And yet that's not what this brisa says. And here, by the way, we can't say, oh, this is the view of Rabbi Natan, because what was the view that Ravina offered? Ravina said that everybody agrees that hatara, the neder doesn't need to take effect. But this brisa is very clear that the neder needs to have taken effect. That's why you can't petition about the naziros first, because the naziros hasn't taken effect until you ask about the first vow about not benefiting from person A, and only when you annul that vow about person A, only then does the naziros take effect. And so the fact that you need to wait shows that you need to have the effect of the vow needs to take effect before it can be annulled. So tiyufta. So in fact, this is a refutation of the viewpoint of Ravina of Rav Papi, and so we go back to the machlokas between Rav and Rav Papi, and it seems like again that the halacha follows the Rav Papi viewpoint, or at least follows Rabbi Natan according to Rava. So that is where things conclude, and now we are ready for the final Mishnah of Maseches Nedarim. Really, such a wonderful time learning this Masechet. I've so enjoyed it. I hope you have as well.
I have a question before we go on to that.
Absolutely.
So as you said, we seem to follow Rav Papi and the Chachamim here. So this would wouldn't this seem to create an issue with the current version of Kol Nidre that we say, because we're annulling vows that not only haven't taken effect, but we haven't even made yet?
So that is a very important debate between Rabbeinu Tam and a variety of others. I'm pretty sure it was Rabbeinu Tam who changed the language of the Hataras Nedarim to be on the past versus the future. In general, we understand it as similar to the statement at the end of Hataras Nedarim, where we say that all of our vows, as we make going forward, we're saying now that we don't have the intention to make them. So it's not truly an annulment, because you're absolutely right. We can't, based on this, we shouldn't be able to annul a vow that doesn't yet exist. So, although again, that does tie into the debate that we had earlier of maybe it's easier to annul a vow that does not yet exist. But in any event, the point is that the way I understand that is more it's about a declaration of lack of intention than a formal annulment. And indeed, of course, the truth is that it's hard to understand that as an annulment, because I guess that's. Some people will say that that's why you bring two Sifrei Torah up, so that way you have three people at the bima. But the point is that it's and the three of them become judges. I believe if I've seen that reference. So the point is that that is not a typical hatara. So I don't think most people understand that would allow you to rely on that hatara if that you were at Kol Nidre last year. If you now made a neder and you say, oh well, I actually want to revoke it based on Kol Nidre. So I don't think that is viewed as actually being successful, and that it's more viewed as as being an indication that we will rely on that there was that in some level the making of the neder was a mistake, and so because you've indicated that you don't intend to make any nedarim, and so or shvuot, and so as a result, and we'll use that as a basis to then do hatara. But I don't think that we take the viewpoint that in fact that the Kol Nidre is truly a hatara on what is coming. Okay, so now we come to the last Mishnah, and the last Mishnah, much of it does not have anything to do with Nedarim, but we've referenced this Mishnah and the piece that does have to do with Nedarim. It's the neder that a woman takes to swear off all marital relations with Jews, and what happens with respect to her husband. So let's take a look and see. So Berishonah Hayu Omrim, originally, when the rabbis would rule as follows: Shalosh nashim yotzos v'not los ksuba, that three women, when they made certain statements, they would get to go out, they would be divorced, they would have to be divorced, and they would get to collect their ketubah. Because often, if a woman has a right to declare or demand a divorce, often she will lose her ketubah. Meaning, if the woman is the cause for the divorce, that is often a basis to withhold from her ksuba. So, for example, if she actually has a marital affair, an intentional marital affair, and she cannot go back to her husband, she loses her ketubah. That because she was the basis for it. So now we're going to deal with three situations. So what are the three situations? Number one, ha'omeret tmeya ani lecha. This is a situation where the woman says, I was defiled. Now, it can't be that I was defiled voluntarily, because if I was defiled voluntarily, well, then she shouldn't get her ketubah because she had a marital affair. So it must be that she was defiled against her will. Well, that means that it can't be talking about a regular Yisrael, because in a connection with a regular Yisrael, the woman's allowed to stay married to him. But when it comes to a Kohen, then she needs to get divorced. So because we have a special rule that if a Kohen, if the wife of a Kohen has marital relations with anybody else while she was married to the Kohen, well, then she is not allowed to return to that Kohen. And yet it's not really her fault. It's because her husband's a Kohen. So as a result, the rabbi said, okay, you're going to get divorced and you get your ksuba. All right, so that's case number one. Shamayim beini leveincha, that there's heaven between me and you. So this is understood as a euphemism for recognizing that the husband is on some level impotent, and so as a result, it's Hashem is testifying that I'm doing everything I can to consummate and to have children and to procreate in this relationship, and it is not my fault, but rather heaven can testify that it's on you, that your failure. So in that case, also we would allow the woman to get divorced and collect her ketubah. And the third case is, I swear that I'm not going to have any relations with Jews. I'm removing myself from all Jews, and this is understood to be in connection with marital relations. And we will see that, and it's also understood that why is it that she's doing that? Presumably, marital relations is very painful for this person, and so as a result, given the fact that she's in so much pain associated with it, so we will allow her to, it's not her fault, so we'll allow her to divorce. This is the original view, and we'll force the husband to give the ketubah to support her. So those were the first three cases. But the problem was, Chazru Lomar, they realized that they couldn't hold on to this point of view, because isha al bala, that we were worried that women were looking at other men and realizing, you know what, I want to be married to that guy. And so they would make up the story. And even though it wasn't true, they would say these things in order to get their divorce and in order to be able to collect their ketubah. So as a result, what do we say? We now have a new view of these three rules. One is how merit me'ani lecha. If she says that she's tameh, well then tavi raya l'dvareha. So she needs to bring proof. Hashemayim beini leveinecha. If in fact she says to her husband that heaven can testify that you're not doing your part in connection with our marital relations, so yasu derech bakasha, then they should do a request. Now there are two different views of what this means. So the Mefarish on the left-hand side of the page, right before it says Gemara, says yasu derech bakasha yivakshu heimenu sheyipterenu beget kiroi ve'ein makrikin oso, that we will ask the husband to give her a divorce because clearly she's very uncomfortable with the situation, but we will not force him to give her the divorce. The Ran offers a different answer based on Yerushalmi. If we take a look 6 lines down towards the beginning of the line, Yasu derech bakasha, Mefurish ber Yerushalmi, Yases suda v'yifayis ve'etza tova kamash malan, that actually we would just have them go out on a date. Sometimes the issue is not about is that there's either a health concern and that he's not eating properly, or that there isn't a sufficient romance in the relationship, and so as a result we'll try to enhance their romantic connection and thereby try to overcome this particular problem. All right, and then finally, if in fact she removes herself from all other having marital relations with all Jews, so then Yafer Lechelko, he should revoke his part of the neder. The part of the neder that is a beino leveina, he can revoke, and the part of the neder that is respect to everybody else, so then that he can leave whole. And that way they can still live together. But she'll remain from all others. So okay, so now let's take a quick look at the beginning of the Gemara, and with that we will conclude. So I don't have time to go through this Ran, but the Ran asks just very quickly. The Ran asks, how could it be that the rabbis could allow the wife of the Kohen to stay with her husband? It seems like from the beginning of our Mishnah and the original rule that the biblical requirement would be that in fact that they should get divorced. So there are a couple of different answers. One is some people say that really the rabbis can even nullify a Torah rule, but the Ran says that can't be because they can only effectively remove a Torah rule by saying sheva al tasa, sit and don't do something. So if you have the rule that we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, the rabbis can say no, we're not going to blow the shofar on Shabbos of Rosh Hashanah, even though in the Torah you should, according to the Torah, you should blow the
according to Talmud Yerushalmi, that is a biblical prohibition to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah.
Interesting. But I was just trying to give that as an example, but we could come up with other examples as well. So that is so the point is that we once again have a question. How is it that the rabbis could allow this woman to stay married to the guy? So the answer that the Ran offers is that the Ran also mentions Eliyahu at Har Carmel, that you can even revoke for a short period of time other biblical laws, like having to offer sacrifices in the Beit HaMikdash, where Eliyahu offered the sacrifice at Har Carmel. But the point is that the Ran says that you can't do that. You can't, and this seems to be a full abrogation of the law. And so as a result, the Ran points out that all marriage, indeed, we use this language in our marriage ceremony. We say Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael, that Harei HaMekudeshes li Kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. That the point is that I'm marrying you according to the rules of Moshe and Israel. And the point is that the rabbis determine when there's a marriage. And so the rabbis have the ability to say about this woman that her marriage prior to the fact that the time that she was raped was not in fact a marriage. And the marriage only takes effect after she was raped, because even though a Kohen is not allowed to marry a married woman, he is allowed, and if he's married to the woman and she gets raped, he can't stay with her. If he wanted to, he can marry a woman who had marital relations before, as long as she wasn't married. So in this case where she was raped, he can essentially marry her, and they would consider her married from immediately after the time in which she had these marital relations. So as a result, that's the Ran's explanation. The Ran then concludes that others say that really the biblical rule is that we should not believe the woman, and that the beginning of our Mishnah is saying a rabbinic rule, but that's a bit of a stretch, and so that's why he likes his specific answer. So all right, let's take a look, one last line in the Gemara. So Ibailahu Amr Lavala Tmei Ani, if a woman says to her Kohen, a husband, that she's been defiled, Mao Shetokal B'Truma, is she allowed to eat Truma or not? So Rav Sheshes Amar Ochels. Rav Sheshes says she can. Shelo Totzi La'az Al Banel, because we don't want people to suspect her children. Because if in fact she's not eating truma, so they'll say, "Oh, she's not eating truma. Maybe her children have something that's a problem with them." Rava Amar Eino Ochelas Efshar De'achla V'Chulin. No, she can just eat chulin, and nobody's going to be the wiser. So Amar Rava, and Rava adds, Umoda Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes would agree to me that she can't eat truma, she'im nis armula she'eino ochel. So once she gets widowed, then she can't eat truma. Midei hu taima ela mishum shelo totzi la'az al banah. Because what was the reason The reason was and they added the Gimel adds the word shalo into the Gemara. Rav Sheshes was concerned about bad things being said about her children. But now that she's already widowed, this Armel and Iskarsha, if she's widowed or divorced, and really it's focusing on the widowed, people will say, Hashta Itztanisa. This is when she became violated. So nobody will think that in fact there's a problem with the children. People will all realize that the problem was only with her. So all right, so that is the Gemara for today. And tomorrow, God willing, we will finish Maseches Nedarim. So I don't think you don't need much of incentive beyond stay tuned for the final daf of Maseches Nedarim. See you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yasher Koach, Chodesh Tov.
Baruch Yesh, Chodesh Tov.